The council chamber was so quiet that Ambassador Chen Wei could hear her own heartbeat. She sat in the human delegation seat, a simple chair that looked small compared to the massive thrones and platforms built for the other species. Around her, representatives from 27 different worlds waited for the final vote count to appear on the central display. The numbers flickered into view. 27 votes for extermination. 0 votes against. 1 abstention. That single abstention belonged to humanity. The Thraken delegate rose from his seat, his forearms spreading wide in a gesture of triumph. His people had suffered the most from Velcron raids. Over 300 years, the insectoid Velcron had attacked his worlds again and again, killing billions. Today, finally, the Galactic Council had agreed to end the threat forever. The Velcron species would be completely destroyed. Chun watched as celebration broke out among most of the delegates. The Korthians clicked their mandibles in approval. The Zenthi flashed their skin in patterns of joy. Even the normally calm Eridar seemed pleased. Everyone wanted the Velcron gone. Everyone except humanity. The council speaker, a tall Vexian with silver skin, called for order. The chamber slowly quieted. The speaker's 3 eyes focused on Chun. Ambassador Chen Wei of humanity, the speaker said, his voice echoing through the vast room. You have abstained from this historic vote. The council would hear your reasoning. Chun stood slowly. She was small compared to most beings in the room, but she had learned long ago that humans did not need size to be heard. She looked around at the faces, scales, and features of the assembled representatives. The human delegation requests a recess, she said calmly. We need time to consult with our government before we make our final position clear. The Thraken delegate made a sound like grinding stone. Final position? He demanded. There is nothing more to discuss. The vote is complete. The Velcron will be eliminated. The vote authorizes action, Chun replied. It does not prevent member species from voicing opposition or choosing not to participate. The speaker raised one long-fingered hand. Ambassador Chun is correct. A recess of 6 hours is granted. The Thraken delegate started to object, but the speaker's word was law. The chamber began to empty. As Chun walked toward the exit, the Eridar ambassador glided up beside her. The Eridar looked almost human, except for their pale blue skin and the fact that they floated rather than walked. Your people surprise me, Ambassador, the Eridar said softly. The Velcron destroyed your colony on New Tasmania. 40,000 humans died. We expected humanity to vote for extermination more eagerly than anyone. Chun stopped and met the Eridar's gaze. That's exactly why we need to think carefully about this. 6 hours later, Chun returned to the council chamber. This time, the room was packed. Word had spread that humanity might take a stand, and everyone wanted to see what would happen. The speaker called the session to order. Ambassador Chun, has humanity reached a decision? Chun stood. She had changed into formal attire, a dark suit with the Earth emblem on her shoulder. She had also brought a data tablet, though she did not look at it. Yes, we have, she said. Humanity formally opposes the extermination of the Velcron species. We will not participate in the action, and we call on the council to reconsider. The chamber exploded. Delegates shouted in a dozen languages. The Thraken delegate roared so loudly that the sound system squealed. Security drones hummed to life, ready to restore order if needed. The speaker slammed his staff against the floor 3 times. The sound boomed like thunder, and slowly the chaos subsided. Explain yourself, the Thraken delegate growled. Your people died by Velcron claws. How can you defend them? We do not defend their actions, Chun said firmly. The Velcron have committed terrible crimes. They have killed billions across the galaxy. They destroyed New Tasmania, and we will never forget our dead. But opposing genocide is not the same as defending murder. They are not people. Another delegate shouted. They are insects, raiders. They have no civilization, no culture, nothing but violence. Chun tapped her tablet. The central display changed, showing images of Velcron hive ships, Velcron warriors, and devastated colonies. Then she changed the image again. This time, it showed human history. Bombs falling on cities, soldiers marching through ruins, starving children in the aftermath of Earth's resource wars. 300 years ago, humanity nearly destroyed itself, Chun said quietly. We fought over water, over food, over land. We killed billions of our own kind. If the galaxy had known about us then, would we have deserved extermination? That is different, the Eridar said. You changed. You grew beyond your violence. Yes, Chun agreed. We did. But not because someone pointed weapons at Earth and gave us no choice. We changed because someone showed us there was another way. She paused. Humanity proposes an alternative. Let us send a joint expedition to the Velcron homeworld. Not to destroy it, but to understand it. To learn why they raid. To see if there is any possibility of change. The Thraken delegate laughed, a harsh sound. Understand them? We understand them perfectly. They kill because it is their nature. Some species cannot be redeemed. Perhaps, Chun said. But perhaps not. We will never know if we exterminate them first. The debate continued for 2 more hours, but Chun could see the decision had already been made. Too much anger, too much pain, too many dead. The council was not interested in understanding. They wanted justice, or what they called justice. Finally, the speaker called for the execution vote. 24 species voted to proceed with extermination. 3 voted against, moved by humanity's arguments. Humanity voted against as well. It was not enough. The council has decided, the speaker announced. Extermination will commence within 1 standard week. All opposition is noted for the record. Chun remained standing. Then I must inform the council that humanity will take further action. The room went silent again. What action? The speaker asked carefully. Chun took a deep breath. She had hoped it would not come to this, but her government had been clear about their orders. If the council sends its fleets to destroy the Velcron homeworld, humanity will send our fleets to defend it. We will not allow genocide to be committed in our name or in the name of galactic justice. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, the Thraken delegate found his voice. You would protect them? You would fight us to save the species that killed your own people? Chun nodded slowly. Yes, we would. Because the day we let fear and anger justify the complete destruction of an entire species, no matter how terrible their crimes, is the day we become something worse than the Velcron ever were. She looked around the chamber one last time. Humanity will draw a line, and we will hold it. If you want to commit genocide, you will have to go through us first. Then, Ambassador Chen Wei of Earth turned and walked out of the council chamber. Leaving stunned silence in her wake. Admiral Sarah Okonkwo stood on the bridge of the UESS Defender, watching 3 human battle groups take position around the Velcron homeworld. The planet below was a dark green sphere covered in massive hive structures that looked like mountains from orbit. Somewhere down there, millions of Velcron went about their lives, completely unaware that half the galaxy wanted them dead. Fleet status? She asked her tactical officer. All ships in position, Admiral. Defensive formation Echo 7. Shields at full power, weapons ready but not locked. Sarah nodded. She was a tall woman with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She had fought in 3 wars during her career, but never anything like this. Never had she positioned human ships to defend an enemy. Time until the Council fleet arrives? 6 hours, ma'am. 6 hours until the largest fleet ever assembled by the Galactic Council reached this system. 6 hours until humanity either backed down or went to war with most of the known galaxy. Sarah did not plan to back down. "Ma'am," her communications officer called out. "We're receiving a transmission from the surface." "It's Dr. Webb. Put him through." The main screen changed to show Dr. Marcus Webb, the leader of humanity's first contact team. He was standing in what looked like a tunnel made of some kind of hardened resin. Behind him, strange shapes moved in the shadows. "Admiral," Webb said, his voice tight with excitement and maybe a little fear. "You need to see this. Everything we thought we knew about the Velcrin is wrong." 2 hours earlier, Webb had led his team deep into the primary hive on the Velcrin homeworld. The journey down had been terrifying. Velcrin warriors surrounded them, each one standing 7 feet tall with 4 arms and armor-like shells. Their compound eyes watched the humans with what seemed like suspicion or maybe hunger. But the warriors did not attack. Instead, they led the humans deeper, through tunnels that spiraled down into the planet's crust. The air grew warm and thick with strange smells. Webb's translator device struggled to interpret the clicking and pheromone signals the Velcrin used to communicate. Finally, they reached a massive chamber. Webb stopped and stared. The chamber was easily a mile across, and every surface was covered in some kind of organic technology. But that was not what made him stop. What made him stop were the hundreds of Velcrin gathered in the center of the chamber, and the 3 enormous beings that could only be the queens. The queens were nothing like the warriors. They were twice as large, with elongated bodies and heads crowned with elaborate crests. They did not move aggressively. Instead, they lowered their heads in what seemed like a gesture of greeting or maybe submission. One of the queens released a cloud of pheromones. Webb's translator beeped and displayed text on his visor. "Welcome, humans. We did not expect mercy, but we thank you for coming." Webb stepped forward slowly. His team stayed close behind him, their hands nowhere near their weapons. "We came to understand," he said. "The galaxy believes you are raiders, killers, a species that attacks without reason. Tell us the truth." The queen made a sound like wind through hollow tubes. More pheromones filled the air. "The truth is painful," the translation read. "We are not killers by choice. We are prisoners of our own biology." Over the next hour, the queens told their story. Webb recorded everything, his mind racing as he began to understand the horrible situation the Velcrin faced. The Velcrin reproduced in cycles controlled by biological regulators in the queens' bodies. For thousands of years, they maintained a stable population, living peacefully on their homeworld and a handful of colony planets. They had art, science, philosophy. They were not the mindless insects the galaxy believed them to be. Then, 30 years ago, everything changed. A cosmic radiation storm passed through their system. It was rare, the kind of event that happened once every million years. The radiation damaged the queen's genetic structure, specifically the parts that controlled reproduction. After the storm, the Velcrin population began to explode. The queens could not stop laying eggs. Every year, billions more Velcrin were born. The homeworld could not feed them all. Their colony worlds could not feed them all. Their technology could not produce food fast enough. The queen showed Webb the crochet chambers, vast caverns filled with larvae. Millions of them, writhing and crying out in hunger. The sound was terrible, like millions of babies crying at once. "We tried everything," the queen's pheromones explained. "We tried to fix our genetics. We tried to reduce the birth rate. We tried to terraform new worlds faster. Nothing worked. Our children were starving." "So you started raiding," Webb said quietly. "So we started raiding," the queen confirmed. "We knew it would make us hated. We knew it would eventually bring our extinction. But what parent watches their children starve when they have the power to feed them? We chose to save our young, even knowing the price we would pay. Webb felt something twist in his chest. He had lost a sister in the New Tasmania attack. He had hated the Velcrin for years. But standing here, watching larvae cry from hunger, understanding that these beings had been forced to choose between letting their children die and becoming monsters to the galaxy, he found his hatred crumbling. "You accepted that you would be destroyed?" he asked. "Yes," the Queen said. "We knew one day the galaxy would come. We hoped only to save as many of our children as possible before the end. When your Ambassador Chun spoke at the Council, we did not understand. Why would those we harmed try to save us?" Webb smiled grimly. "Because humans know what it's like to be desperate. Because we know that good people can be forced to do terrible things when they have no other choice." Now, back on the Defender, Admiral Sarah watched Webb's recording with growing concern. Around her, the bridge crew sat in silence as they learned the truth about the Velcrin. "This changes everything," Sarah said when the recording ended. "Does it, ma'am?" her tactical officer asked. "They still killed billions. They still destroyed colonies." "Yes," Sarah agreed. "But context matters. Intent matters." She looked at the planet below. "Prepare a transmission to the Council fleet. They need to see this before they arrive." "Ma'am," the communications officer said urgently. "The Council fleet just entered the system. They're 6 hours ahead of schedule." Sarah cursed. "How many ships?" "Sensors are counting now. Initial estimate is..." "Ma'am, it's over 3,000 vessels. 3,000 ships against humanity's 200. Sarah had known they would be outnumbered, but seeing the numbers made it real. "Broadcast Webb's findings on all channels," she ordered. "Let every ship in their fleet see the truth. And get me aligned to their commander." The main screen split. On one side, Webb's recording continued to play. On the other, the face of the Thraken fleet commander appeared. He looked like a nightmare, all sharp edges and cold eyes. "Admiral Okonkwo," the Thraken growled. "Stand aside. This is your final warning." "Commander, have you received the data from our surface team?" Sarah asked. "The Velcrin are not what we thought. They're victims of a biological disaster. Their raids were acts of desperation, not malice." "I have seen your data," the Thraken replied. "It changes nothing. Desperation does not justify the murder of billions. My people have bled for 3 centuries. Today, that bleeding ends." "We can help them," Sarah insisted. "Human geneticists believe they can repair the Velcrin's reproductive system. Give us time to try." "No," the Thraken said flatly. "You have 1 hour to withdraw your fleet. After that, any human ship that stands between us and the Velcrin will be destroyed." The connection cut off. Sarah looked at her crew. They looked back at her, waiting for orders. She knew what Earth wanted. She knew what her conscience demanded. But she also knew what the next hour might cost. "Send a message to all human ships," she said slowly. "All crew members who want to evacuate to non-combat vessels have 30 minutes to do so. No one will be forced to fight in this battle. Make it clear that this is likely to be a one-way mission." Her first officer, Commander James Torres, spoke up. "Admiral, permission to speak freely?" "Granted. No one is going to leave, ma'am. Everyone on this fleet volunteered knowing what we might face. We're not backing down now." Sarah looked around the bridge. Every face showed the same determination. She felt pride swell in her chest. "Very well. Battle stations. Full defensive formation. And send a message to Earth. Tell them we're holding the line." 55 minutes later, Admiral Sarah broadcast a message to both fleets and to the entire galaxy. She spoke simply, from the heart. "My name is Admiral Sarah Okonkwo of the United Earth Space Service. 300 years ago, my ancestors nearly destroyed themselves in the resource wars. We were starving, desperate, and violent. We committed terrible crimes against each other. If the galaxy had known about us then, would we have deserved extinction? She paused, letting the question hang. Humanity survived because someone showed us mercy, because someone gave us a chance to be better. Today, we stand here to give the Velcrin the same chance. Not because we forgive their crimes, but because we remember being in their place. We remember being the species on the brink. The Thraken fleet advanced. Sarah watched them come. If you want to commit genocide, you will have to go through us first. She finished. Humanity draws the line here. The countdown reached 0. The Thraken fleet opened fire. The first wave of missiles streaked across space toward the human fleet. Admiral Sarah watched them come, her hands gripping the arms of her command chair. Every instinct screamed at her to give the order to return fire, but she held back. Point defense only, she commanded. Do not fire on their ships. Defend, but do not attack. Her crew moved with practiced efficiency. The defenders' defensive systems came alive, intercepting missiles with laser fire and electronic countermeasures. Around them, the rest of the human fleet did the same. Explosions lit up the darkness of space like fireworks, but not all the missiles were stopped. 3 human destroyers took direct hits. Their shields flared and failed. One ship went dark, tumbling through space. The other 2 held formation, damaged but still fighting. Commander Zhao's ship is hit, the tactical officer reported. They're venting atmosphere. Life support is failing. Sarah's jaw tightened. People were dying because of her orders. But she could not back down. Not now. Then something unexpected happened. The Thraken fleet's second volley never came. Instead, Sarah's communications officer looked up in surprise. Ma'am, we're receiving new signals. Multiple ships are breaking formation from the Council fleet. Which ships? Sarah demanded. Eridar vessels, ma'am. 17 of them. They're moving too. They're joining our defensive line. Sarah stared at the tactical display. Sure enough, 17 Eridar ships were gliding away from the Council fleet and taking position alongside the human vessels. Then more ships followed. Zenthi cruisers, Korthian frigates. Even 3 massive Vexian battleships docked within minutes. 47 Council ships had abandoned the attack fleet and joined humanity's defense. The Thraken commander's face appeared on the screen again. His expression was one of rage and disbelief. What is this? He roared. Return to formation immediately. The Eridar fleet commander responded, his voice calm. We have reviewed the human data. The situation warrants further investigation. We will not participate in an extermination without understanding the full circumstances. You betray the Council. The Thraken shouted. No, the Eridar replied. We uphold its highest principles. The Council exists to bring order and justice, not to commit genocide out of anger. The Thraken commander cut the connection. For a long moment, his fleet held position. Sarah could imagine the calculations happening on his flagship. He had come prepared to sweep aside the humans. But now he faced nearly 300 ships, including some of the most powerful vessels in the galaxy. Finally, the Thraken fleet began to withdraw. They did not leave the system, but they pulled back to a holding position at the system's edge. Sarah let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. They had not won, but they had not lost either. The line held. On the surface of the Velcrin homeworld, Dr. Webb was having a very different kind of breakthrough. Ambassador Chun had arrived with a team of human geneticists, and together they were working with Velcrin bioengineers in one of the Hive's research chambers. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, humanity's leading expert in genetic modification, studied the Velcrin genetic code on her portable lab equipment. She had been working for 18 hours straight, fueled by coffee and determination. "This is actually elegant," she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. "Their reproductive system is incredibly sophisticated." The damage from the radiation was precise, almost surgical. It disabled the regulation mechanism but left everything else intact. "Can you fix it?" Webb asked. "Yuk?" I looked up, her eyes bloodshot but bright. "Yes, I think we can. The technique we developed during Earth's genetic crisis, the one we call cascade repair, should work. We can introduce a modified gene sequence that will rebuild the damaged regulators." One of the Velcrin queens clicked excitedly. The translator struggled to keep up with the rapid pheromone release. "This is possible? You can stop the overpopulation?" "Theoretically, yes," Yuki said. "But there's a problem. To treat your entire population, we need massive resources. Special equipment, rare biological compounds, processing facilities. It would take years and cost more than most planets' entire annual budgets." The Queen's excitement dimmed. "We have nothing to offer. We spent all our resources trying to feed our children." Webb looked at Chen. The ambassador had been quiet, listening carefully to everything. Now she pulled out her communication device and stepped away to make a call. Webb could hear her speaking rapidly with someone on Earth. When Chen returned, her face was grave. "Earth's government is willing to commit to the project. We'll provide the resources needed." "That's wonderful," Webb said. "You don't understand," Chen replied quietly. "This will bankrupt the human economy for at least a generation. We'll have to pull resources from infrastructure, education, healthcare. We'll face rationing, unemployment, maybe social collapse." The vote passed by only 3 votes. Webb felt the weight of that decision settle on his shoulders. Humanity was willing to sacrifice its own prosperity to save a species that had killed thousands of their people. The Vulcan Queen had been silent, processing the translation. Now she lowered her massive head until it nearly touched the ground in front of Chun. "Why?" The Queen's pheromones asked. "Why would you sacrifice so much for us?" Chun knelt down so she was at eye level with the Queen's compound eyes. "Because it's the right thing to do. Because mercy is more important than revenge. Because the kind of galaxy we want to live in is one where people help each other, even when it's hard." The treatment began the next day. Human ships started arriving with equipment and supplies. The work was massive in scale. Every Velcrin needed to receive the modified gene sequence, and it had to be done carefully to avoid complications. But as the weeks passed, it became clear the treatment was working. Birth rates began to stabilize. The queens regained control of their reproductive cycles. For the first time in 30 years, the Velcrin could plan for a future that did not involve raiding other species to survive. However, not everyone was happy with humanity's choice. Back on Earth, the economic impact hit hard. Factories closed. Food prices rose. People lost jobs. Protests erupted in major cities. Many humans began questioning whether saving the Velcrin had been worth the cost, and the Thraken had not forgiven. Their fleet remained at the edge of the Velcrin system, a constant reminder that not everyone accepted humanity's decision. More concerning, the Thraken had convinced several other species to join a trade boycott against humanity. No ships, no goods, no support. Ambassador Chan found herself in the uncomfortable position of defending her decision to angry humans and hostile aliens simultaneously. In a heated session of the Galactic Council, the Thraken representative confronted her directly. "Your people suffer because of your foolish mercy," he said. "How long before they turn against you? How long before Earth decides the Velcrin are not worth the price?" Chun stood her ground. "Humanity will endure. We've faced worse before. Have you?" The Thraken challenged. "Your economy collapses. Your people starve. And for what? To save the species that murdered your own? Before Chun could respond, something remarkable happened. The Velcrin Queen herself entered the council chamber. It was unprecedented. The Velcrin had never been part of the council, never even been invited to speak. But the Queen had traveled from her homeworld to make a statement. The chamber fell silent as the massive insectoid moved to the center of the room. She released a cloud of pheromones that every translator in the chamber picked up simultaneously. Humanity gave us more than life. The Queen's words appeared on every screen. They gave us dignity. They saw us not as monsters, but as people in crisis. They sacrificed their own prosperity so our children would not starve. The Queen turned slowly, her compound eyes reflecting the lights of the chamber. The Velcrin can never repay this debt, but we offer everything we have. Our resources, our technology, our loyalty. We stand with humanity now and forever. It was a powerful gesture, but Chun knew it was not enough. The Velcrin were still recovering. They had little to offer that would offset humanity's losses. Then the Eridar ambassador stood. The Eridar also stand with humanity. We will increase trade and offer economic assistance. One by one, other species began to stand. The Zenthi, the Corthians. Even some species that had supported the boycott began to waver. They had watched humanity sacrifice everything for a principle, and it had moved them. But the most important moment came from an unexpected source. A small delegation from Thraken space requested permission to speak. They were not government representatives, but private citizens. Survivors of Velcrin raids. Their spokesman was an elderly Thraken who had lost his entire family in an attack. He stood before the council with tears in his eyes. "I have hated the Velcrin for 50 years, he said. "I wanted them all dead. But watching humanity choose mercy over revenge, watching them sacrifice their own future to give the Velcrin a chance, it made me ashamed." He paused, his voice breaking. Humanity showed us that we can be better than our pain. If they can forgive and help those who wronged them, then perhaps we can too. The Thraken government representative sat stone-faced, but Chun could see something shifting in the room. The tide was turning. 3 months after the treatment program began, the Velcrin achieved full population stabilization. Dr. Tanaka's technique had worked perfectly. The crisis was over, but the real change was just beginning. The Velcrin, grateful beyond measure, shared technological innovations they had developed during their desperate attempts to save themselves. Advanced biological engineering, new methods of food production, breakthrough material science from their hive construction techniques. These technologies, given freely to humanity, began to offset the economic costs. Not immediately and not completely, but enough to give Earth hope. More importantly, they provided innovations that other species wanted, creating new trade opportunities. The Galactic Council announced a new policy. Before any extermination order could be carried out, a full investigation must be conducted to understand the circumstances. A new committee was formed to handle first contact situations where species appeared hostile. They called it the First Contact Ethics Committee, and they asked Ambassador Chun to lead it. At the ceremony, where Chun accepted the position, she gave a short speech that would echo across the galaxy for generations. Humanity did not save the Velcrin because we are special or better than anyone else. We saved them because we remembered being saved ourselves. We chose mercy because we want to live in a galaxy where mercy exists. Today, the Council has chosen to make that kind of galaxy real. This is not humanity's victory. This is everyone's victory. As the ceremony ended, the elderly Thraken survivor approached Chun privately. His government had officially ended the boycott that morning. "My people still mourn our dead," he said quietly. "We may never fully forgive the Velcrin, but you showed us something we had forgotten." "What's that?" Chun asked. That the measure of civilization is not how you treat your friends. It's how you treat those who have wronged you when you have the power to destroy them. Chun smiled. That's a lesson humanity learned the hard way. We're just glad we could share it. 2 years had passed since the standoff at the Velcrin homeworld. Dr. Marcus Webb stood in the observation lounge of the joint human Velcrin research station, watching ships come and go from the planet below. The station was huge, a collaborative effort between both species, and it hummed with activity day and night. Behind him, a young Velcrin scientist named Kreshtar approached with the peculiar clicking gait her species used. She had been born after the crisis, part of the first generation to grow up in a stable population. She carried a data tablet in 2 of her 4 hands. Dr. Webb, she said through her translator device, the latest reports are in from Earth. Their economy is recovering faster than projected. Webb smiled. That's good news. What's the growth rate? 8% this quarter. The new bioengineering contracts are making a real difference. Webb nodded. The technologies the Velcrin had shared were proving valuable across the galaxy. Human companies that had nearly gone bankrupt during the crisis were now thriving by applying Velcrin innovations to everything from agriculture to construction. But it had been a hard 2 years. Webb remembered the protests on Earth, the angry messages from humans who felt betrayed by their government's decision. He remembered seeing children going hungry because of rationing. He remembered the doubt that had crept into his own heart late at night, wondering if they had made the right choice. Dr. Webb, Kreshtar said quietly, may I ask you a question? Of course. Why did you do it? Really? I have read all the official explanations, but I want to understand. Her compound eyes studied him carefully. Your sister died in the New Tasmania raid. You had every reason to hate us. Yet you were the first to come here, the first to ask for understanding instead of revenge. Webb was silent for a moment. He looked out at the planet below, at the massive hive structures that now housed a stable, peaceful civilization instead of billions of starving children. I did hate you, he said honestly. For years, I hated the Velcrin with everything I had. But hatred is exhausting, Kreshtar. It eats you from the inside. When I learned the truth about your crisis, about the impossible choice your queens had to make, something changed. I realized that holding on to that hatred was not honoring my sister's memory. She would have wanted me to choose understanding over revenge. Kreshtar clicked softly, a sound Webb had learned meant thoughtfulness. Your species is strange to us. So willing to forgive, so ready to sacrifice for others. We do not understand it, but we are grateful. We're not special, Webb said. We just remember what it's like to need forgiveness ourselves. On Earth, Ambassador Shen Wei walked through the streets of New Beijing. The city was alive with activity. Markets were full again. Construction crews were working on new buildings. Children played in parks without the shadow of rationing hanging over them. But Chun knew the recovery was fragile. There were still people who blamed her for the hardships they had endured. Just last week, someone had thrown paint at her during a public appearance. The paint was blue, the color of mourning in Thraken culture. A reminder that not everyone had forgiven humanity's choice. She arrived at a memorial park dedicated to the victims of New Tasmania. 40,000 names were carved into black stone walls. Chun came here every month, a private ritual. She owed it to these people to remember that her choices had consequences. Today, she was not alone. A small group of Velcrin stood near the memorial. They wore simple robes marked with symbols that Chun's translator identified as signs of mourning and regret. When they saw her, they approached slowly. Their leader, an older warrior named Tekshin, bowed low. Ambassador Chun, we did not mean to intrude. We come here each month to remember what our desperation cost your people. Chun was surprised. You come here? Every month? Yes, Texian said. The young ones do not always understand the weight of what happened. They know the history, but they did not live through the desperation. We who remember, who participated in the raids, we must carry that burden. These humans deserve to live. We took that from them. We can never make it right. You're trying to, Chine said softly. That's what matters. Is it enough? Texian asked. We have given you our technology, our resources, our loyalty. But can any of that balance 40,000 lives? Chun looked at the names on the wall. No, she said honestly. Nothing can balance that. But you're asking the wrong question. The question is not whether you can erase the past. The question is what kind of future you choose to build. Across the galaxy, the human doctrine was being put into practice. The First Contact Ethics Committee, led by Chun, had already intervened in 3 situations where species were on the brink of being classified as threats to galactic peace. In each case, the committee had uncovered circumstances that explained the hostile behavior. A species whose aggression was caused by a parasitic infection. A civilization whose attacks were actually desperate calls for help that had been misinterpreted. A culture whose biology made them appear threatening when they were actually trying to communicate. None of these situations were as dramatic as the Vulcan crisis, but each one represented lives saved and understanding gained. The galaxy was slowly learning that first impressions could be deceiving, and that sometimes the most hostile species were simply the most desperate. The Thraken were the last holdouts. Their government had ended the official boycott, but culturally, they still maintained distance from both humanity and the Vulcan. Their wounds were too deep, their losses too great. But even there, change was happening. A movement had started among younger Thraken who had been inspired by humanity's choice. They called themselves the New Path, and they advocated for forgiveness and reconciliation. Their elders viewed them with suspicion, but their numbers were growing. One evening, Admiral Sarah Okonkwo received an unexpected visitor on her flagship. The Thraken fleet commander who had tried to destroy the Vulcan homeworld requested a meeting. Sarah had not spoken to him since that day 2 years ago. They met in Sarah's ready room. The Thraken commander looked older, more tired. He sat in the specially reinforced chair Sarah kept for larger species. Admiral Okonkwo, he began, his voice lacking its former hardness. I have come to acknowledge something that my government will not. What's that? Sarah asked carefully. You were right. The words seemed to cause him physical pain. Not about everything. I still believe the Vulcan deserved punishment for their crimes. But you were right that there were other options besides extermination. You were right that understanding matters. And you were right to stand in our way. Sarah was quiet, letting him continue. I have been reviewing the data from the past 2 years, the commander said. The technologies the Vulcan shared have saved millions of lives across the galaxy. New farming techniques have ended famines on 3 worlds. Their construction methods have made housing affordable for billions. If we had destroyed them, all of that would have been lost. It's not about the practical benefits, Sarah said gently. I know, the commander replied. It's about principle. About choosing mercy even when revenge would be easier. About being better than our pain demands. He stood slowly. I cannot undo the past. I cannot give back the lives my people lost. But I can acknowledge that your path was the wiser one. After he left, Sarah sat alone in her ready room for a long time. She thought about that day 2 years ago when she had positioned her fleet against impossible odds. She had been terrified, certain that she was leading her people to their deaths. But they had held the line. And somehow, against all logic, it had worked. 6 months later, the Vulcan were formally invited to join the Galactic Council. The vote was not unanimous. 15 species abstained, most of them Thraken allies. but 212 species voted in favor. It was a clear majority. The Velcrin Queens declined the invitation. The decision shocked the galaxy. After everything, after being saved from extinction and welcomed back into galactic society, the Velcrin were refusing membership? Queen Sheshtar explained their reasoning in a broadcast to the entire council. We are grateful beyond words for this honor, but we have not yet earned it. Our species committed terrible crimes out of desperation. Before we can stand as equals in the council, we must first make amends. The Queens proposed instead a period of service. For the next 50 years, Velcrin ships and workers would be available to any species that needed help. Disaster relief, humanitarian aid, construction, whatever was needed. They would prove through actions, not words, that they had changed. The galaxy watched in amazement as the former raiders became the galaxy's most dedicated helpers. When a massive earthquake struck the Zenthi homeworld, Velcrin workers were the first to arrive. When famine threatened a remote colony, Velcrin ships brought food and farming experts. When a plague broke out on a frontier world, Velcrin medical researchers worked day and night to develop a cure. And slowly, very slowly, the galaxy's opinion shifted. The species that had been monsters became heroes. Not because they asked for forgiveness, but because they earned it. Dr. Webb stood once again in the observation lounge of the research station. 5 years had passed since that first day he had descended into the Velcrin hives. Kreshtar, now a senior researcher herself, stood beside him. Did you ever imagine it would turn out like this? She asked. Webb shook his head. No. There were so many times I thought we had failed. So many moments when it seemed like the whole effort would collapse. But it didn't. No, Webb agreed. It didn't. Because enough people decided that mercy was worth fighting for. On Earth. In a small ceremony attended only by close friends and family, Ambassador Chen Wei received the Nobel Peace Prize. She had tried to decline it, arguing that she had only done what was necessary, but the committee insisted. In her acceptance speech, she spoke simply and from the heart. People ask me why humanity chose to protect the Velcrin. They ask what made us willing to sacrifice so much for a former enemy. The answer is not complicated. We did it because we want to live in a galaxy where mercy exists, where understanding is possible, where even those who have done terrible things can be given a chance to change. She paused, looking out at the audience. Humanity is not perfect. We have made countless mistakes throughout our history. We have been violent, cruel, and short-sighted. But we have also learned something important. We learned that the hardest choices are often the most important ones. That standing up for principle, even when it costs everything, is what defines us. Chun's voice grew stronger. The Velcrin were not the enemy. Desperation was the enemy. Fear was the enemy. The willingness to see entire species as disposable was the enemy. When we stood between the Council fleet and the Velcrin homeworld, we were not just protecting them. We were protecting the idea that every life has value, that every species deserves a chance at redemption. After the ceremony, Chun returned to her apartment in New Beijing. She was tired. 5 years of constant work, of defending her decisions, of trying to hold together a fragile peace, had worn her down. She thought about retiring, letting someone else carry the burden. Then her communication device chimed. It was a message from Kreshtar at the research station. The young Velcrin scientist wanted to share news. They had just successfully applied Velcrin bioengineering techniques to restore an extinct species of earthbird. It was a small thing, but it represented something larger. The Velcrin were not just repaying humanity's mercy. They were actively trying to heal the wounds they had caused. Chun smiled. Maybe she would work a little longer. Across the galaxy, the story of humanity's stand spread. It became more than history. It became legend. Other species told their children about the day the humans drew a line and refused to let genocide happen. They spoke of Admiral Okonkwo holding position against impossible odds. They remembered Dr. Webb descending into the hives to seek understanding instead of revenge. They honored Ambassador Chun for choosing mercy over justice. But the story was not just about humanity. It was about what happened when someone chose compassion over vengeance. About what became possible when understanding replaced hatred. About the courage it takes to protect your enemy when everyone else wants them dead. The galaxy learned that strength was not measured only in weapons and ships. Sometimes the strongest thing you could do was stand between the victim and the executioner and say, "Not today. Not like this." Years later, a young human student asked Dr. Webb a question during a lecture. "Do you think humanity would do it again? If another species committed terrible crimes, would we protect them too?" Webb considered the question carefully. "I hope so," he said finally. "I hope we would always choose to understand before we choose to destroy. Not because it's easy, not because it always works out, but because that's the kind of species we want to be. That's the kind of galaxy we want to live in." He looked at the mixed audience of humans, Velcrin, Thraken, and dozens of other species, all learning together. We protected the Velcrin not because we knew it would work out. We protected them because it was right. And that, more than any technology or weapon or alliance, is what makes humanity who we are. The Velcrin in the audience clicked softly in agreement. The Thraken students nodded slowly. And the human students sat a little straighter, proud of what their species had chosen to stand for. Because in the end, the galaxy remembered not who had the strongest fleet or the most advanced weapons. They remembered who had the courage to show mercy when revenge would have been easier. They remembered the day humanity drew a line and declared that some principles were worth any cost. And they remembered that the measure of civilization was not how you treated your friends. It was how you treated those who had wronged you when you held all the power. That was the lesson humanity taught the galaxy. And the galaxy would never forget.